There's never been a more exciting time to get internet from satellites in space. Here at the end of 2022, we're going to take our periodic look at the state of the satellite industry, looking at the present and future of SpaceX's Starlink and all the wannabe competitors, some of which want to actually bring satellite internet directly to phones in your pocket. So let's dive in and see what is the latest from space. Hi, I'm Chris with the Mobile Internet Resource Center, here to give you an update on the space race. Not the classic space race from the 1960s racing to the moon. This is the new space race, racing to bring internet to you wherever you are on Earth, sometimes potentially straight to phones, satellite to phones. It's a pretty exciting time out there. So, of course, the dominant story in space is SpaceX and Starlink, which has taken a huge lead in bringing internet to, well, a lot of places, and now officially supports mobility and has expanded coverage dramatically. But SpaceX isn't the only company in this race, and there's a lot of competitors that are looking to do similar things or, have their own different take on bringing a whole new generation of satellite internet to customers. And there's a whole new type of company that are looking to bring, well, not just internet to big dishes and receivers and all that, but directly to phones, in some cases even to existing phones that you might already have. So this is going to be a long video. There's a lot of companies to cover, but we're going to run down and give you a full update on what's the current state of things and what's the likelihood of what's coming next and what's in the future and in the pipeline. And is this stuff exciting, or is it, just going to piddle on out? So we've got our takes, and we're going to dive into each company one at a time, starting with SpaceX's Starlink. First off, SpaceX's Starlink is undeniably way in the lead, and they are moving fast. If you look back at the stories of the past year, a lot has been happening with SpaceX since our last big satellite update right back in March. For one, well, SpaceX officially supports mobility now. They rolled out the new Starlink flat high-performance mobile antenna that is available for RVs and boats and officially supports in-motion usage. So that is now no longer kind of an under-the-radar thing. Pretty exciting. They've expanded coverage pretty dramatically, all the way up to the polar regions to the north. Expanded to over 40 countries, and unofficially they actually are working out to sea across oceans now. So there's been a lot of coverage expansion with SpaceX as well, and they're getting very close to having true global coverage with Starlink. And, well, there's some other things that have been not so good with the evolution of Starlink over the past year. As it's become so popular, it's been getting slower, particularly in the United States and North America, where there's a lot of customers trying to get onto Starlink. The performance that was once, people were regularly seeing 200 megabits per second and some really dramatic fast broadband from space. A lot of people have now been seeing speeds that they would even consider unusably slow in congested markets. Sometimes we've seen reports of under 5 megabits per second, even under 2 megabits per second, with a full clear view of the sky, just because the Starlink satellites are getting overloaded. So kind of some of the big news of the present, and we're going into the future, is Starlink fighting back against, well, all of that demand on their network. For one, they'll be launching more satellites. They're still only halfway through deploying the Generation 1 Starlink network. So they've got authorization for over 4,000 satellites in that network. They're just now crossed over about 2,200 that are in active service, and they're launching more all the time to finish fleshing that out. So there is more capacity. They'll be filling in the coverage holes that they have to the poles and stuff. Alaska still has a lot of dropouts, and we'll be adding another layer of capacity over the rest of the continent. But they're also going to be fighting back in another way that has some Starlink customers a little bit on edge and even upset, and that's by changing the terms of service. And this is because service is month to month. This is applying to everyone. Nobody's grandfathered in. So they're rolling out new terms of service that are bringing things straight from the old cellular playbook to what had been the formerly SpaceX's simple and easy well, it's unlimited, unthrottled, just do what you want with our plans. Well, no more. Now they're rolling out things like priority data and network management. So a lot of plans will have just 1 terabyte of prioritized data. And once you've achieved that much, well, you'll be at a lower priority in the network. This is helping, potentially, we'll have SpaceX fighting back against the most heavy abusers who are putting the most demand on the network. But it is kind of, changing the nature of the game, and particularly for heavy users, it can be a concern. For a lot of our audience, though, there's no impact because, well, RV users and residential users using their service in a portability fashion were already at a lower priority in the network. So for us, maybe performance will get better as the network gets better managed, less congested. We'll have to see, but there are some pretty major changes happening in the terms of service. They were expected to go into effect as of December 1st. Now SpaceX has pushed those changes back to February. So we'll be watching very closely to see exactly how those changes come out, apply, and what sort of impacts they have on the network. Other changes that we're expecting to see coming to Starlink, as they roll out these new terms of service is, well, there's a lot of question about what are they going to do with people who have been kind of bending the rules, using the Starlink standard dishy, the rectangular dishy that is designed for residential or use, or RVs that are stopped, not in motion, and that people have been using that in motion. And well, it's just working right now for most people, but that is against SpaceX's terms of service, and they have tested in the past their ability to put a block on that sort of in-motion usage and or limit that usage to only when you're moving at less than 10 miles per hour or so. So we're expecting that, well, SpaceX, now that they officially have a mobile supporting dishy that is FCC authorized and everything, that they might bring that block back and turn off and disable mobility for people who are bending the rules and using the rectangular, much more affordable dishy instead of the bigger, expensive, high-performance mobile supported dishy. So that block might be coming back to disable people who've been bending the rules on that. And another place where people have been kind of bending the rules is out using Starlink out to sea. The Starlink Maritime Plan, which costs $5,000 a month, is what SpaceX's official service that will work globally and across oceans and out to sea, which is way out of the budget of most of the typical normal cruising audience of global cruisers and stuff who are not on a super yacht budget. And these people have discovered that the Starlink RV service, that just instead of $5,000 a month, $139 a month, that service is working just fine while cruising out to sea. People are being connected in the middle of the ocean with that service right now, unofficially. We expect that SpaceX will be making some changes there, hopefully not forcing these people to pay $5,000 a month, but instead reading the fine print of their upcoming terms of service changes. They have a new concept called ocean data, which will be service that you can pay extra for by the gigabyte while on the ocean. No specific details of exactly what that applies to or the pricing has been released yet, but again, that's something we expect to see from SpaceX and Starlink in the next few months that will close that loophole and start charging for ocean data and also transcontinental data, using your service outside of your home continent for land nomads who are traveling around. So there's a lot of changes, a lot of tightening of the terms as SpaceX is going forward. So some interesting stuff to keep track of there. But now going forward, what is the future of Starlink? And well, this has all been talking about stuff that is riding on Starlink's Generation 1 network. That network is, well, from the beginning, Elon has said that that's a network is not something that is sustainable or profitable or designed for the long term. And SpaceX is really kind of betting its future on the Generation 2 Starlink, a whole new generation of bigger satellites with a lot more capability and capacity. And, well, it requires a whole lot of new launches. And, well, that is coming. They've actually just now, just this December, gotten FCC approval for the first 7,000 satellites of the Generation 2 constellation of a planned proposed 30,000 satellites. So a bigger constellation than Starlink Gen 1, a lot more capacity coming online. They're going to be actually putting on a piggyback feature that will have cellular connectivity to T-Mobile customers. We'll be talking about that in a second in the section on phones. So they're going to be doing from Starlink satellites direct to phones. There's a lot of things that will be coming in these Gen 2 satellites. But the catch is these are much, much bigger satellites than the Starlink Gen 1. And SpaceX's current Dragon booster rockets are not powerful enough to launch these. SpaceX is betting their entire future of Starlink on their upcoming Starship and Super Heavy boosters. This is the unproven, the new, gigantic, bigger than a Saturn V rocket that has yet to ever fly. And they got a lot riding on getting this system off the ground. In the next few months, the first Starship prototype might launch, and if it is successful, hopefully by the end of 2023, SpaceX will be in a position to begin launching and rapidly building up this Gen 2 constellation. But if not, everything is delayed. If Starship has issues and needs to go back to the engineering drawing board, that will be delaying and pushing back the expansion of Starlink. So a lot to keep track of here with SpaceX. We'll be watching it. It is certainly very, very exciting to keep track of what SpaceX is up to. They're moving very, very fast, but they do have some competition at last getting into orbit, and we're going to dive into that next. So SpaceX's long-term biggest constellation competitor is OneWeb, which at one point in time looked like they were going to be able to bring next generation satellite service to market before SpaceX. They kind of were moving fast to begin with, but OneWeb in some ways has been kind of a cursed company. They ran into launch delays, then they ran into, well, a pandemic hit, and they crashed into bankruptcy and were being actually in the process of being sold off for parts in 2020 until the UK government led a consortium of investors to reinvent OneWeb, basically retarget OneWeb, and throw in a whole lot of money to get it back on taking off. So all throughout 2021, OneWeb was back. They were launching again, getting their constellation into orbit until, well, Russia invades Ukraine, and OneWeb had been relying on Russian Soyuz launch service, and, well, their next batch of satellites was literally being held hostage on the pad. And as the conflict escalated, it was all kind of locked down and shut down, and OneWeb was again completely derailed with no way to get to orbit. And the only way they could find to survive was turning to their competitor SpaceX and saying, hey, can we hitch a ride on your Dragon rockets? You've got the capacity, you've got a lot of extra rockets. And, well, to SpaceX's credit, they're like, yeah, you're a customer, we will launch your satellites, even if you're going to compete with Starlink. So SpaceX is now launching the last of the OneWeb constellation to help OneWeb finish getting into orbit. The very first of these, after this long pause for most of 2022, the first of the SpaceX launches of OneWeb satellites is set to happen later today, just a few hours from now from Florida. OneWeb is also relying on a new Space India, so an Indian launch provider. So they've got 2 launch providers to get their final few launches done to finish this network that has been kind of stalled in orbit for a while. So OneWeb is getting back into the launch game. They're going to get their final few satellites in orbit, and, well, they're finally going to be able to turn on their constellation, because that's kind of the catch when you're building a satellite constellation. It doesn't do much good until you have, all the orbital shells filled in. You can't start selling commercial service if you have coverage 45 minutes out of every hour someplace. You've got to, have enough satellites to be 24/7 there. And OneWeb, by sometime in the first few months of 2023, will finally be getting there and being able to offer their service. So what's going to be coming from OneWeb? Are they going to be like SpaceX? Are they going to be selling direct to consumers? That was some of the original vision for OneWeb. They were actually originally consumer targeted, but as OneWeb pivoted and pivoted and pivoted through all of this structural change, they're actually now focusing more on enterprise and government services, and on partner companies that will then be the bridge to maybe offering some consumer services. OneWeb is partnered with HughesNet, and HughesNet has said that there is potential for some hybrid services several years down the road. But sooner than that, actually, there's a new partnership, OneWeb and Kymeta, which is a satellite antenna and high-end satellite services company, have actually announced they're going to bring out service for, well, super yachts and super high-end RVs starting in March 2023 with this big U8 flat antenna. And, well, they're going to, basically probably be completing with the Starlink maritime service. So probably going to be pretty expensive hardware, pretty expensive monthly service, but they're claiming that they're going to be a very serious direct competitor for Starlink. So something to look forward to as soon as March is another satellite service out there, some OneWeb via Kymeta. So keep an eye out for that, and we'll be watching. And further down the line, other service providers might be doing things with OneWeb, both residential service or potentially mobile service. Probably not going to be general, widespread, affordable consumer service-based targeted from OneWeb anytime soon. But again, the satellites will finally be there, and we'll be watching to see what comes online. So the next major competitor in the pipeline is Amazon's Project Kuiper. So Amazon has been saying for a while that they're going to be spending billions and billions and billions, upwards of $10 billion plus, to launch their own competing massive satellite constellation of thousands of satellites. And they haven't shared too much details about it other than that they're hiring, they're working on it, and they are committed to this massive investment. But just this past October, Amazon published one of their rare updates on Kuiper saying that they are at last ready to launch the first 2 prototype Kuiper satellites, and they've got them scheduled to go out in sometime Q1 2023. So they've got those prototypes booked, and they are going into production on the full scale, all the rest of the satellites necessary to build the Kuiper constellation, assuming those prototypes go well. And Amazon has pre-booked, they've pre-bought capacity of 80 plus launches from launch providers all over the place to basically ensure that they've pre-booked, prepaid for their rides to space. They've actually bought up a lot of the launch capacity from a lot of companies just to make sure that they will have the launches there. And Amazon's even said that if they have to, they will resort to paying SpaceX to launch Kuiper. So this is a big constellation. Amazon is certainly interested in the consumer market. They've got some ambitious engineers, and we will be waiting to see, once they launch their prototypes, what else they're ready to reveal about pricing, schedule, and availability, and when we'll start to see Kuiper service come to market. But again, like I said, a constellation has to be, at least to some pretty significant level, fully deployed before you can start offering service. So even once Amazon does start launching, it's going to take a while before we're ready to see Kuiper in any commercial fashion. So probably nothing actual in 2023 that you can use, but maybe in the years after. So something to watch. Amazon definitely has the big bucks to invest in catching up to space. Those are the 3 kind of new generation low Earth orbit satellite constellations that are kind of changing the game for what satellite internet could possibly be. So SpaceX and Starlink, OneWeb, and Amazon Kuiper. They all orbit at a much lower altitude. The satellites are flying through the sky, and it takes hundreds or thousands of satellites to provide 24/7 global coverage. These low Earth orbit constellations just work that way. Legacy satellites worked via geostationary satellites, where it'd be one big satellite sitting in a fixed position in the sky. Those are the satellite dishes you could actually aim at, because the satellite doesn't move. It doesn't appear to move relative to you sitting on one location on the ground. The legacy satellite industry is not sitting idly by watching these new LEO upstarts kind of take over the market. Well, at least seems like they might be, but they actually are working to do their own next generation geostationary satellites, bigger satellites. And the biggest of them all is the Viasat 3. So this satellite coming from satellite provider Viasat, which used to be known to consumers as Exceed, is going to be the biggest communication satellite, the most powerful communication satellite ever launched, with a full terabyte of capacity and an antenna system that unfolds in orbit to be just this gigantic, massive system. So Viasat 3 is going to be capable of some really, really immense performance, and it can be focused in target areas. Like, the Viasat 3 is focused on North America. So we've been tracking the Viasat 3 since I think it was first announced back in 2015, 2016. It's been delayed several times. The satellite is now finished being constructed and is scheduled to launch in January 2023, actually by SpaceX on a Falcon Heavy. It's the only rocket big enough to launch something this heavy into geostationary orbit. So Viasat will be kind of making their comeback in 2023 as Viasat 3 comes online, assuming that big massive antenna unfolds successfully. They will have a whole new generation of geostationary satellite options and capacity to start selling, but they can't change the laws of physics. Geostationary satellites are so far away that there's basically an inevitable half-second delay as your messages go back and forth. So the latency of satellite connections will be high, but the speeds can potentially be high. They've got a potential for a lot of speed, a lot of capacity, but latency to work with. Now, the way potentially around this is hybrid systems, where you have your geostationary satellite for your capacity, and you have your low Earth orbit satellites or cellular for the latency and the uplink and kind of the low latency side of the connection. And the geostationary satellite companies are kind of actually pursuing this sort of hybrid strategy. Viasat actually has purchased a marine satellite company called Inmarsat that has lower orbit satellites and is talking about building out a constellation and building out a hybrid architecture going forward. So we will be paying attention to see what that looks like. That's years down the road, but coming in 2023, we have Viasat 3 and geostationary, new generation of capacity. Now, there's one other legacy satellite provider of note, kind of the granddaddy of them all as far as consumer satellite services, HughesNet. And HughesNet is not dead yet. They are still around. They actually have a new big satellite, not as big as Viasat 3, but their new big Jupiter 3 satellite is built and is set to launch sometime in the first half of 2023. So they're bringing out new capacity. They have a partnership with OneWeb to eventually tie into what OneWeb is doing. And they're pursuing what they're calling their hybrid fusion strategy, where they're actually going to start using cellular and satellite combined. So you're kind of trying to give them people the best of cellular with the capacity of satellite, and they've actually rolled out their fusion service in a few select residential markets. So that's service where they have basically a cellular uplink, and they're partnering with a local cellular network to have the lower latency side of the connection, and then the satellite is providing the higher bandwidth, higher data. So that architecture is little fiddly and stuff right now, but does have potential in the future. And Hughes is saying they're pursuing a multi-strategy that will combine geostationary satellites, low Earth orbit satellites, and cellular to have kind of the best of all worlds. And potentially that sort of architecture will actually work really well for mobile users and everyone else. Is take advantage, combine all these different types of connections. So it's a glimpse at the future. Hughes has never been the most impressively proficient technical company, but we're interesting to see what they come out with, and as they continue to evolve, do they have something that makes them back to being competitive with Starlink, because they've definitely lost a whole lot of customers to SpaceX over the last few years. Now, next is a whole different kind of satellite service. Instead of satellite going to big dishy type receivers that are outside and several feet across and whatnot, what about satellite service that goes directly to a phone? Now, this is kind of a bit science fiction-y. It's really complicated to have something the size of a cell phone talking to a satellite, even low Earth orbit satellites that are hundreds of miles away and zooming past overhead. But over the past year, this has been kind of one of the big stories, is satellite to phone is real and is coming. And people have gotten excited about it because they think, hey, great, I don't need cellular anymore. Satellites will cover it all. And they expect that they will have a cellular-like experience, or even a 4G, 5G-like experience from space. That's not the case. The cellular connectivity from space is going to be low speed messaging, kind of fill in the gaps, fill in the dead zones, fill in the coverage where the cellular towers can't reach with basic emergency level text messages, emergency locations, maybe eventually some picture messaging and voice calls, but not surf the web, not broadband, not video calls. The capacity just isn't there from that distance, that sort of speed anytime soon. But there are several players that are doing some very interesting takes on what it means to bring satellite to a phone, and we'll kind of give you a rundown on the state of the art of all of them, because a lot of them are making real progress this year. So first off, the first one to actually have something you can use is Apple. Now, when the iPhone 14 line launched, that is actually one of the signature features in it, is Apple has direct satellite emergency SOS features built into the iPhone 14 now. So when you're out of cellular and Wi-Fi coverage and you're having an emergency, you can still basically text message with emergency services. And that is done in partnership with Globalstar, the company that was known for the spot messengers and everything else. Apple has, for the last several years, been behind the scenes funding Globalstar, investing in them a whole lot of cash, and building out this whole new infrastructure and architecture to support satellite messaging. But it is, on one hand, very limited. You can't even send a message to a friend. You are communicating only with emergency dispatch, but, well, that's a lot of peace of mind for nomads who might be off the beaten path, because it will work anywhere you've got a view of the sky. Right now, launched in the United States and Canada. Lots of other countries will be coming online in the near future. So this is pretty exciting, but is that all? That's all that Apple's going to offer with satellites? Well, odds are not. Apple is investing hundreds and hundreds of $millions into Globalstar, and Globalstar is rolling out and is going to be launching between now and 2026 a whole new level of constellation, a whole new set of satellites with more capabilities. So we expect that this is just the start of what is rolling into the iPhone series as far as direct satellite communication. And Globalstar said that they are basically now committed to Apple. Apple has bought up 85% of their present and future capacity. So certainly there'll be other things to see, but, well, Apple being so secretive, we're probably not going to get many pre-announcements. One truism of the cellular world is that any new feature that Apple rolls out, well, Samsung is likely to be copying it. And that seems to be the case as well with satellite integrated features. So Globalstar's big competitor for kind of this low bandwidth satellite messaging market has always been Iridium, which actually has a more advanced network, or at least up to this point, as far as their constellation that has enabled devices like the Garmin InReach and the Iridium Go and others satellite messengers that have become very popular with a lot of the hiking and overlanding and cruising community, because they give you very basic two-way communications, weather downloads, and a few other things. Well, there's rumors out there that Iridium has made it clear that they are working with a major phone provider, and the rumor mill has pointed to Samsung as the most likely. So future Samsung phones, maybe the Galaxy phones that come out in 2023, might start to incorporate direct Iridium connectivity. So all the internal radios to have Iridium-style messages built directly into Samsung. Cool. So we'll be seeing something coming from Iridium that looks similar to what Apple and Globalstar have done. Probably starting with emergency services, but maybe a few basic text messaging and things beyond that. The catch with both what Apple and whoever is working with Iridium is doing, the catch there is this requires specialized radios, because they're tapping into existing satellite networks, but they're completely different type of radios than the cellular radios. So they have specialized radios. It doesn't work with existing phones. It has to have new hardware, new antennas, new capabilities built into the cellular device. What if it was possible to talk directly from space to existing cellular devices without needing new hardware? And big announcement of this past year was in August, SpaceX and T-Mobile announced that they were doing just that. They made their connectivity above and beyond initiative, is what T-Mobile is calling it, where they are going to be piggybacking a payload onto Starlink Generation 2 satellites that will be this big, giant, normal cellular antenna that will be able to talk to existing cellular devices using spectrum that T-Mobile owns. Now, this has got a lot of regulatory hurdles. This is not authorized by the FCC yet, is not approved. The satellites haven't been built, the antennas haven't been built, but they were announcing this initiative. They were announcing that they want to sign up other carriers around the world to potentially participate in this as well, to allow roaming and to allow people to have connectivity with the phones they might already have anywhere there is a T-Mobile dead zone and or whatnot. So that is pretty exciting technology. But again, they are focusing on messaging. This is not get online and surf. This is not going to be voice calls. This is not going to be doing much. They're going to initially be on messaging, emergency messaging. Picture messaging is going to be a part of it at some point, but it'll be very low-speed connections, and it will be expanding over time. And again, T-Mobile and SpaceX announced it in August just to get a little jump on the press before Apple announced the iPhone 14 because they knew it was coming. But this is something that is way pre-announced. This is relying on the next generation Starlink satellites, which have not even begun to launch yet. They're dependent upon Starship. And at the very, very best case, T-Mobile hopes to have limited beta service by the end of 2023. So again, something very exciting to watch. It is super cool that it will work with phones that so many of us already have. And well, that is in the pipeline. So it is exciting to see that sort of initiative coming to space soon. The other thing we do get asked about is when it comes to SpaceX and such, is people keep saying, well, why doesn't SpaceX and Tesla and or Elon Musk do their own phone that talks directly to Starlink and directly to Starlink broadband? And there's been kind of this rumor mill / hoax of the Tesla Model Pi phone, or the people have now started calling it the Telon phone after Elon Musk, that they're saying that this thing exists, that it's in the works, that it is a real product. And no, it is not. This is actually was started as a hoax by a graphic designer who created some fanciful mock-ups of what a Tesla phone could look like and showed it off with a totally imagined feature set, including Starlink connectivity. But the existing mainstream Starlink physically requires an antenna much larger than a phone is physically able to do. So there's the laws of physics do not allow that sort of Tesla phone to exist. And those rumor mills got a recent injection when Elon Musk, buying Twitter, said that he would bring out his own cellular phone if Apple and or Google ever kicked Twitter out of the App Store. But bringing out a phone is something that would take years of engineering if he did anything more than just slap a Twitter brand onto a generic Android phone. So to bring out a phone that was special would be a multi-year project, and that project is not underway yet. So no Elon phone, no Tesla phone. Those are hoaxes, so don't get sucked into them yet. Now, there are actually, though, 2 other companies that are working to bring satellite coverage directly to existing phones, and they've actually been at it longer than SpaceX and T-Mobile. They've actually been pioneering this technology for a while. The first one to actually demonstrated the satellite connection to an existing phone for text messaging is a company called Lynk. They are launching several satellites. They're building a constellation of 10 satellites focused on messaging. and they work with existing phones, and they are actually claiming to be rolling out commercial service in places starting maybe even later in 2022, if not 2023. Their first customer is Aleve in the Bahamas. So they have to be working in partnership because they don't own any spectrum. They have to be working in partnership with cellular providers on the ground, and they will be enabling messaging. But their messaging is going to be very limited. The messages will only go through about once every half hour or so because the satellites aren't there for 24/7 coverage. But, well, if you're sitting out bobbing in the middle of nowhere in the Bahamas far from cellular coverage, you'll be able to get messages every so often and get your weather updates and get other things. So that's the sort of things they're looking to roll out. And, well, they're hoping to eventually bring that out worldwide, at least find the partners to bring it out worldwide, where you'll have a backup with existing phones. You'll be able to say, hey, roam onto Lynk. I could send text messages, 50 cents, authorize yes, go. So they're hoping to be able to fill that gap to anyone, anywhere, give you a roaming partner in the sky with basic text messaging. There's one other company that has got even more ambitious plans, and that's AST SpaceMobile. They have been looking to build a constellation with satellites with absolutely gigantic antennas, the largest antennas ever deployed onto consumer satellites. So these antennas will be big enough to reach to cellular devices, even potentially, they've still yet to prove this, but they're claiming, even potentially to cellular devices that are indoors, not just outdoors with a clear view of the sky, because their antenna system is so big and so sensitive. And they're saying that over time, they'll actually be able to provide potentially even data-worthy speeds, maybe low broadband speeds, filling in the gaps in coverage with cellular providers all around the world. So SpaceMobile wants to, again, work with cellular providers on the ground to help them fill in their coverage gaps. There has been some rumors that they actually have an existing deal with AT&T to at least experiment with their technology, to do the same sort of thing like T-Mobile and SpaceX are doing to fill in the coverage gaps with cellular straight to space. And, well, will this work? We'll have to see, but SpaceMobile has just launched in the last few months their first full-scale test satellite, the Blue Walker 3, with this gigantic antenna system on it. And if that proves itself, and they're in behind-the-scenes experiments with several carriers around the world, they will start building a constellation to provide this sort of service direct to existing phones. So this stuff is going from science fiction to reality, and it's really kind of cool to see what might be coming down the pipe. So to wrap this all up, there's never been a more exciting time to be tracking the technology from space. We've got all the new low Earth orbit providers starting to show real progress, trying to catch up with SpaceX. We've got SpaceX getting ready to move into their second generation network with a whole new wave of Starlink capabilities. And, well, we've got kind of a whole new type of satellite with satellite direct to phone and existing cellular devices that can kind of be revolutionary in a completely different way. Maybe not high-speed satellite, but, well, it works with the devices you have. Maybe the routers you have, the phones you have, the hotspots you have will at least have some sort of low-speed connection in the years ahead, no matter where you are. So dead zones could be becoming a thing of the past. Satellite is becoming a completely revolutionary technology that is going to make it a lot easier for nomads to stay connected wherever they go. But the important thing to keep in mind is that satellite is not a replacement for cellular. It is a complement to cellular. Even the satellite companies are saying that their technology is designed to coexist and complement and fill in the gaps with cellular, because cellular towers will always, if you're in range of a 5G tower, there will always be more speed and capacity available via the cell tower than via the satellites passing overhead. So building and designing and thinking around a hybrid strategy is what a lot of these companies are doing for their own long-term goals, and what anybody who is trying to build their own connectivity arsenal should be keeping in mind for what you're building onto your boat or your RV or anything else, is thinking of ways that you can take advantage of these satellite systems, whatever particularly at the moment, Starlink is the one to invest in, but you'll still want to have cellular for capacity, dealing with the congestion of urban areas, and, well, of course, dealing with obstructions and everything else. So it's never been a more exciting time to keep track of the space race. We will be covering it here, and we'll be periodically doing these big industry wrap-ups to keep you up to date. But just in general, keep track of things over at the Mobile Internet Resource Center. We've got a full satellite resource center where we've got our guides to Starlink, using Starlink and stuff. And we've got our information about all these other options. You can weigh whether the existing satellite messengers will work for you and everything else. So again, check out the Satellite Resource Center over at the Mobile Internet Resource Center. And again, well, keep your eyes on the sky.
These videos are brought to you by our premium members, our mobile internet aficionados. They make it possible for us to track this news and create these videos. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe to our channel, or better yet, consider becoming a member yourself.